Welcome back to another episode of Mostly True, the history music podcast, where the things that we say are mostly true, probably.
Probably. I mean, we kind of try.
We try to be accurate, but again, disclaimer, do not use this as a source on an official essay or thesis for school.
Please do not. Do not. Do not say that, this podcast said that Jojo Siwa was the equivalent of Mozart on your thesis.
Modern day Vivaldi, Jojo Siwa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, you can say that if you want, but don't quote us on it.
Yeah, please don't.
Mitchell, who are we talking about today?
Today, I know you're very excited about this one. He is definitely a good one. He's a good one, but we're talking about Ludwig van Beethoven.
Ludwig.
Beethoven.
Yes, not to be confused with the very furry Beethoven.
Not to be confused with the dog. We're talking about the OG Beethoven.
I mean, he might have been furry. I don't know, but not in the same
Interesting
way.
thing, he was very short.
Really?
He was 5'4". Okay, but we'll get into that
so
later.
You're saying everyone short is furry? I'm 5'4".
Well, let's just end it there and cut to
okay,
song.
We'll circle back.
Welcome to Mostly True. It's like a podcast.
So it's interesting because Beethoven is kind of like the first soiree into this like romantic music. So sometimes people put Beethoven in the classical period, like the very end of the classical period, and then sometimes they put him in the romantic period because he's like right at the turn of the century. So he's born 1770 or 1771, 1770. But anyway, he was born in 1770. They don't know exactly the day. They say it could be the 16th or the 17th in December. But yeah, so he's like right in the cusp. What does that mean? What are their defining features?
Defining features of Sagittarius is you're adventurous, you like culture and like involving yourself with culture. I don't actually know that much about Sagittarius, but my two very best friends growing up, Natalia and Elise, shout out, were both Sagittarius. So they're fine. They're good. They're alive and well.
Maybe we need to have an expert on the pod every week, just at the beginning, so that we can say they're, an expert astrology person to say,
keep going.
Yeah, to just give us the lowdown on, to give us a lowdown on what their sign means they should be as a composer. And then we can go through and see if it adds up.
I'm looking up Beethoven as a Sagittarius to see if anything interesting. He says, as a true or it's he being ChatGPT.
The internet. Okay.
The internet. She says, as a true Sagittarius, he was known for being impatient, blunt, and intensely emotional.
Okay.
Love for nature, visionary, philosophical intensity. Interesting.
What's the animals for the Sagittarius?
Sagittarius is the archer.
Okay, I don't really know how that plays in.
It's kind of cool.
Yeah. So Beethoven, true Sagittarius. I'm just saying that. I don't even know what that really means for him, but he's a Sagittarius. But yeah, he's right on the cusp. He's right on the cusp of like the 1700s and the 1800s. So he kind of lives through that transition into romantic music. And so he's kind of like the forefather of romance era.
So for our maybe listeners.
At this point, I think we're up to 2 or 3. So we're listeners now.
So for our listeners, what would be the big differences between what's defined as the classical era versus the romantic era?
So, I mean, part of it is just the composers that fall within the dates. But like we've talked about, the classical era kind of sets the standard for a lot of form when it comes to music. And then the Romance era takes a lot of that form and adds back in deeply expressive music. And so that's why
Mm,
it's, we kind of call it the Romantic era, because it brings back this emotion and this like romance and passion um, into music that we haven't really seen in Western music to date. So
I see.
that's kind of like the big thing, is that the Romantic era, it takes what the classical era has done in terms of setting the forms, when it comes to sonata form, symphony form, like all of these different things that the composers in the classical era really, really took a lot of time, like Mozart and Haydn specifically, especially, set the standard for classical form. And then all of the composers, and Beethoven's the one that kind of kicks this off. He takes those forms and he says, like, how passionate can we make these? And how much
Hmm.
emotion can we bring in true German form? So
In
this is
true
something that, like,
Sagittarius form, if you will.
Sagittarius, if you will. And so that's kind of what the Romantic era becomes about. And so you get a bunch of really amazing composers that bring that stylistic style into into the music world.
Nice.
So
Cool. There's a song by Beethoven that I actually listen to all the time, and I can't remember what it's called. I think it's Sonata in C minor or something, but it like makes me feel so I don't even know what it makes me feel, like sad, but also like in love, but also it's the one that's like
yeah,
dun 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 dun. Do you know what I'm talking about?
yes,
Listen to it all the time.
yes.
I'm not doing it justice with my voice,
I know which one you're talking
unfortunately.
about. I'm trying to remember which one it is.
Sonata number 8 in C minor. Sorry.
There we
Okay.
go.
That's what it is.
Yeah. But he does such a great job with his music in terms of, yeah, like it has this kind of dark emotion, melancholiness to it almost. Um, that is very, very different than what you have heard in a lot of the music before him. Um, and I think part of this kind of comes from his early life. Like if we look at, you know, he didn't really like his family. His father was a very tortured man, kind of drunk all the time. His mom, he really loved his mom, but also just not a good family life.
This
Um,
boy.
yeah, and so he even started a rumor. This goes back to him starting rumor. He started a rumor that he was a bastard son of a nobleman just because he hated his dad so much. So he just like started spreading this rumor that like that's not actually my father. Actually, I am
My
someone else's
gosh.
son.
He's like, "No, trust me, I'm actually really rich.
Yeah,
I'm like an heir."
yeah. So
Interesting.
yeah,
That's kind of sad.
it's unclear whether that was like he started the rumor or he just like didn't stop it. He like encouraged it. He was like, "No, actually, you're right. I'm not his
He
son."
added to it. He heard kids talking about it at school and he was like, "Furthermore, I
Mhm.
that is true." I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't know.
but so his dad, we kind of talked about how Mozart was this prodigy, right? And so Beethoven was kind of like that. Um, but Mozart's dad like took him on tour and he did this whole like kind of European tour, world tour equivalent as this child prodigy. And Beethoven's dad similarly, but it feels a little bit different in this case because it feels like Beethoven's dad saw like, oh, my son is this musical prodigy. I got to get every penny out of him. And so, whereas Mozart, it felt like it was a little bit more like he was happy to do it. Beethoven, the the record shows a little bit less like we're both doing this because we love this. It was very much like dad is saying like, you could actually make us some money. We're going to do this. I don't care what you think.
Right, like taking
And
advantage
so,
of him.
yeah. And a
That's
lot of
sad.
like kind of sleazier things, like when they were on tour, even like I think Beethoven was 6 or something when they would play these whatever, but his dad would say he's 4. So like certain things where his dad was just like coming up with these lies or things to try and make it seem
He was like a con
more.
man.
He was a little bit more of a con man, and I think Mozart's dad was whatever, but um, I think in this case, it was definitely not as happy to do it.
As kosher.
Hmm.
Oh, he
One
was
would
not.
say,
I see, I see. Yeah,
yeah,
one might
and
say.
so it's kind of surprising that even through all of that, he still was like, "Oh no, I want to do music." And another interesting thing about Beethoven is we see a lot of writing from him that he's very like he cares so much about the music. Like for him, it was kind of like the reason that he still did music after all of that was that that was what got him through it, right? The music was what got him through it. And so he also has just such a really interesting kind of philosophy when it comes to why he does music and what he does it for, which I think was something really cool to read.
What is the
Um,
philosophy?
so as we get going, we learn more. Beethoven's not he's not doing hot. Um,
Sure.
one of the really difficult things that we know, one of his big things that's a defining characteristic of Beethoven that everyone knows is that he went deaf. And as a musician, that's like the worst thing that could possibly happen.
Yeah, that's so sad.
And so there is actually um, a letter that he writes. I don't think he ever sends, but he writes while he's staying at this resort. Um, he wrote this letter to his brothers that he never mailed. And the resort was called the Helgenstadt. And so this is like this really famous kind of this is why he did what he did in terms of music. And it's referred to and known as the Hilgenstad Testament. But like just a little segment out of it, he says, "Only art and art held me back. Ah, it seemed impossible to me that I should leave the world before I had produced all that I felt I might. And so I spared this wretched life." So, like, for him, the
He's like
reason
a
that
poet too. That's
yeah.
beautiful.
So for him, it was very much like, I have all of this music inside me. I can't just off myself because the world will never hear it. And so he, like as he was going through all of this, it was just kind of like that was his philosophy. Like he did everything for the music. And so even though he was not always a really great person to be around, he was kind of known for being, would rub people the wrong way. Um,
Sure.
towards towards the end of his life and throughout his life, you see a lot of this kind of like, I do it for the music. I am he had like a not great life,
Yeah.
he lost his hearing. That was his entire job. He was also known for being just like sick all the time. Like he had so many ailments, so many things, like his body was just totally breaking down almost his entire life. Um, and so for him to still be able to do what he did, I think that's really like a testament to his work too, is it's so heartbreaking, like, when you listen to it,
Yeah.
and, like, when you learn more about his life, you start realizing, like, I get it, and you, like when you listen to the music now, like, even after, like, reading more into him and then, like, listening to the music back, you're like, "Oh," like, you hear
Yeah.
it, which is something
Right.
that's so interesting.
I feel like that's especially because he went deaf, like you said about the music being inside him. I feel like that's so beautiful. It's like his
Mhm.
body and everything was breaking down, but it was like his gift was so irrepressible. I don't know. It's just like so
Yeah.
romantic. It's romantic, like the
It's so
music
his
and
love for music, you know, it like
yeah.
his only romance was with music. And like he, you
Hmm.
know, other parts of reading is like he courted many women, but
Sure.
he never found it, you know,
Right.
like
Right.
either it was because he was, you know, unlikable in some ways, or he was just like always sick, or, you know, there's lots of, you know,
Yeah.
documentation of him like trying to court these different women, but none of them were ever really into him in that way. And so he also never,
Aw, always in the friend zone.
yeah, also never really made any marriage work either. So,
Mhm.
yeah, it's kind of the story of Beethoven is kind of depressing. Not gonna
Well, I
lie.
feel like he's your classic, like, tortured artist. Like, he'd probably be insufferable
Exactly.
because the woman's, like, trying to be cute and romantic, and he's like, "I have an idea." He's like, "Hang
Uh-huh.
on, hold that thought," like, has to go to the piano, like, starts scribbling, like, that's how I
Uh-huh.
imagine his
Yeah.
dating life to be is and then the woman's, like, just, like, waiting around, like, "Okay."
Okay, what next? Yeah,
I also
exactly.
heard he threw a chamber pot out the window one time out of rage.
Yes. So that was another thing. Like he kind of lived in squalor because he was so unlikable and like was horrible to like any staff that would come and work at his house or whatever. Um his house was notably a mess all the time. So there's a couple notable people on in his like early career. He like played for an enthusiastic Mozart. So this is something to keep in mind that like all of these people are around the same time.
Mhm.
Something that's interesting about Beethoven, like when you listen to Mozart and Haydn, you're like, okay, I get it. They're from the same era. The music feels very classical, but
Yeah,
then it's
they
kind
knew
of
each
crazy.
other too, right?
hmm Haydn actually taught Beethoven.
Right. But he knew Mozart too, like they were
hmm They all
okay.
knew each other, but it's so interesting because I think when you listen to Beethoven, somehow his music sounds so different than Mozart and Haydn.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that always strikes me whenever I'm listening to it is I'm like, these people all were in the same time. It was all in like a
Mhm.
very similar era. So Beethoven definitely came after, you know, his influence and his big contributions came after Mozart and Haydn had kind of moved on. But it's still crazy that it's like Mozart would have seen Beethoven perform and then Haydn literally
Right.
taught Beethoven. And it's interesting too because Haydn taught Beethoven, but then Beethoven was also such a menace that Haydn was like, "I can't do it anymore. I'm done." Like,
Wait, that's kinda crazy, I didn't know that. How
yeah.
long did he study with Haydn before he was like, "No, I'm not doing this?"
So it was in 1792. Haydn visited Bonn. That's where Beethoven is from. He's from Bonn, Germany, and so he visited. Um, and then so around that time he started teaching him, and then this book put it as the Beethoven ego was already fully developed and did not submit mildly to criticism. Haydn proved to be a desultory teacher and was exasperated by his brash pupil, whom the only master sardonically dubbed the Great Mogul.
The Great Mogul?
hmm
What does that mean? In my brain, that's like a bump on a ski hill.
Well, so a mogul is also, I'm assuming that he's referring to the locomotive.
Oh, interesting.
It was a steam locomotive with 3 pairs of driving wheels and 1 pair of smaller wheels in the front. So, I guess when he's saying that he's a train off like, there's no stopping him. He wants what he wants. I there's nothing I can do.
Guess, like, there's something to be said I don't know, because obviously it's good to be teachable, but
Mhm,
at the same time, like, Beethoven created things that were vastly different from what Haydn created, and so you
mhm,
almost think, like, "Okay, well, maybe it was for the best that he was kind of a steamroller because he just
mhm.
believed in his ideas so much," you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess yeah, you never know because like, what would have happened if Beethoven was so teachable and was like I should be writing music more like Haydn instead of what I want. Like
Right.
what would it have been? So
Mm-hmm. It's giving Bob Dylan in the Bob Dylan movie.
seen it, The Complete
Starring Timothy
Unknown.
Chalamet. Yes, that's what it's called. Um, it just like there's a part where he's like at the festival and they're like, play this kind of music, and he's like, no, I'm playing
Playing what
more
I
like
want to.
rock. I don't know. It was a whole. They made it more of a drama in the movie than it needed to be, but
Classic.
it's like they're all the same. All these like tortured
Mhm.
musicians with like a vision and a dream,
Exactly. Yeah. So he kind of was like, I'm going to do my own thing. And that was how it was for Beethoven. And one of the things that he was most known for was his improvisations. So,
Improvisation.
that
I
was
like how you
like
said that.
his improvisation. Um, he would do these improvs and he'd be super emotion filled improv. So it wasn't like this, what most people were used to when it was like very structured and it was like come up with this like little melody, repeat it, do little variations and maybe change a key, play it in another key and then come back to the original. Like he was doing things where it's like he was doing that, yes, but he was also just very emotional when it came to his playing and the way that he played. And that was something that was very new to a lot of people.
And this was on the piano.
Yes. So his main instrument was the piano. And so he it's known that he wasn't necessarily as good of a piano player as, say, a Mozart. Like Mozart was known to be a very, very good virtuoso piano player, and Beethoven wasn't necessarily at the same level, but um, he was able to make up for it in his way of playing and his way of writing that was very different.
Hmm. That's
And
cool.
yeah, so I think when we're talking about some pieces that happen, so he kind of has three parts to his life. There's three eras of Beethoven that like historians will kind of break down. And so within the first era, this is kind of this early era. He writes a couple titles that are pretty interesting. I think the one that's most interesting to me is he writes one titled um, Eroica, and he was also very passionate politically, which is something interesting about Beethoven.
Yeah.
Um,
Not
and
surprising.
so his third symphony had this long background that went back to the democratic ideals of the French Revolution. And so he was
Oh,
very interested in finding a way to like he looked at Napoleon Bonaparte and he saw a lot of himself in Napoleon.
another short
Uh,
king.
Another short king. They were the same height.
Mhm.
So they were both
It's
five
really
four.
beautiful. He felt represented. That's
Exactly.
lovely.
So he saw this like enlightened liberator for the European masses, and he like wanted that to be in his music. Like he wanted to build that into what he was doing. And so the original title of the symphony was actually supposed to be Bonaparte. And so the story goes that when he, heard about Napoleon crowning himself emperor, he said, um, then he's nothing but an ordinary man. Now he'll trample on all the rights of men to serve his own ambition. And then he renamed the piece when he found
Hmm.
out. So, um, but that's the legend that was the original name. That's the story. And then when he found that out, he was like, well, okay, well, great. You know?
Dang. Never meet
So
your heroes or
never
see them
meet your,
crowned emperor.
yeah. So,
One or the other.
yeah. And so
Dang.
he kind of had this revolution of musical democracy or whatever you want to call it. Like he was very into building that and following that and putting that in his music, which I thought was something really interesting.
That is really interesting. Like, it doesn't surprise me that the like hot-headed tortured artist would be really passionate about politics. That doesn't surprise me really. But I just didn't know. It's like these aren't like songs with words. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like You
Yeah.
don't always know what the emotional intent is. You just feel that there's a undercurrent, you know?
Yeah, and it's so interesting when you're like, how do you I love learning about some of these because it, like, reminds me that it's not like, the music just doesn't come out of nowhere. Like, there's a reason that these artists do things, and there's, like, intent behind the work, and there's stories behind a lot of them, and especially with so much of, like, the
Right.
classical era, when it's like things are named by the number at this point, you know? It's
Right,
like
yeah.
Symphony Number 5, Opus 32, Movement 1, you know? It's kind of
Yeah,
like
yeah, totally.
sometimes it's really easy to lose the heart or the story behind the music because you're like,
Mhm.
it's just another numbered opus or another numbered symphony and a movement in a symphony.
It's like how Taylor Swift writes her songs about people, and it's like, okay, well, we all know what this is about because she says it.
Mhm.
Like, probably, like you were saying, a lot of these things, all of them are probably from something. It's just not, like, perceivable to us, but it would be
Yeah.
so cool to know, like, or maybe if you were living in that day and you were, like, in that circle, you would hear, like, some dark, moody thing, and you're like, "Ugh, he just went through a breakup," you know? Or like, "Yeah, I heard it didn't work out with the
Yeah,
Duchess
exactly.
of Schönberg," or whatever, that's not a real place, but, um
But yeah, exactly. Especially if you think about, like, a composer would go up and talk maybe a little bit before they present their piece even,
yeah.
and that's not
Right.
necessarily going into music, that's not anything that, you know,
You
when
can
you just
record
get the
it.
music in front of you, you think about.
Right.
Yeah.
It's also not like now where they film all this stuff.
Mhm. Yeah, there's not a full, like, backstory with everything. Everything's
Mhm.
program music to some degree. There's some big explanation from the composer.
Mhm.
Um,
Oh, imagine how good that would feel though, like, if you just composed this big emotional piece based off of something you're going through, and then you're conducting it with, like, a full symphony. Like, that would be so cathartic.
yeah,
I feel like that's why some of these like, conductors, especially the composers who conduct their own music, like, my gosh, it'd be so, like, riveting. I would get so into it.
so yeah, you're like, "Oh, there we go."
I'm like, "Bum, bum, bum, bum," like, it'd
Exactly.
just be so epic and probably, like, such an outlet for them,
Yeah,
and really interesting for the audience.
for sure. Yeah, like, it would be really interesting to know and so cool to see just the knowing the backstory or living it,
Mhm.
you know? You're seeing all of the stories about the French Revolution, you're seeing everything that's coming out of France, you're hearing stories about Napoleon. You hear that, oh, Beethoven's working on this new piece called Bonaparte. And then, you know, Napoleon does this crazy thing. And you're like, whoa, is he still writing that Bonaparte piece? And it's like, oh, no, it's not titled that anymore. But then you want to see it, you want to hear it because you're like, I want to know like how Beethoven feels about this man, you know?
Yeah.
So I think it's definitely, it's definitely really, really, really interesting knowing the backstory. So,
It's also crazy, I have to remind myself this all the time, that the way they heard these pieces back in the day was seeing them performed.
mm,
There was no recording,
no.
and that's just something that sometimes goes over my head, like, you'd think, "Oh, everyone knows all these songs because 'cause they're all listening to them," but it's like, that's
Yeah.
not how it works.
Yeah, and it's crazy to like, at this point, music is still very, like, past it's still, like, mouth to mouth in that not mouth to mouth, word
Word
of
of
mouth.
mouth? Mouth to
Gosh,
mouth resuscitation.
we're resuscitate but,
Sing
like
"Staying Alive."
but it's interesting because you think about you know, sometimes you'll even hear different recordings, conducted by different people, and, like, the tempos will vary, even now, even today, and so it's really interesting to think about how, like, in their day, you know, they were using these tempo markings. They would say like, "Oh, play this Adagio, not andante, but like, wait, no, andante is one, not
Andante.
al dente.
Adagio is
What's the
when
one
you
with
lift your leg in
pasta? El
ballet.
dente? What's
El
the
dente. No, el dente. Yeah.
yeah,
It's like you
andante is the music one. But it's like, so you'll have that as a music marking, but like if the composer isn't there with you, how do you know exactly how fast they want it? And there's not necessarily a recording to go to reference it.
right.
So it's really interesting when you're looking at in this day, there is a lot of, you hope you have like a musician that played it in the original premiere of it. So they can let you have a violinist, your first violinist or something, it played for the premiere of
Right.
it that can help you with whatever, so it's a lot of just like the community is really small and that's like how they are learning about the music and knowing how to perform it. Because
Right.
in this day too, it's like not, there's not a lot of reference apart from just someone who knows, you have to either get
Mhm.
it direct from the composer, this is their premiere, or you have to like ask around a little bit to do your research on what it is. There's not necessarily as much clear recording that you can go find, or, even a lot of these manuscripts are
Yeah.
all of these manuscripts at this point are handwritten. There's no like all of the copyists are doing it, but there's people that are handwriting every instrument part.
There's no
And I don't
printing press yet, right? Or am I crazy? No, that was in the
well,
1500s.
there's printing press, but I don't know what the situation is on music yet. Like we haven't figured out a system for that yet. And
Right.
so
Right,
I
because the printing press you arrange the letters and stuff.
mhm. So yeah, so there's a lot of this where all of these things are still being hand copied, because that's the fastest, the easiest, the really the only way to pass copies and make stuff happen.
Wow. And then if you try and decipher what he like say something he wrote is messy, you have to
Hmm.
I guess try and figure out what it is if you weren't there listening to what it is.
Yeah. So okay, sorry, we got to get back to Beethoven. I'm all over the place. Okay, so within all of that, so we got the Napoleon Bonaparte
Okay. Are we
situation.
off the record for a second?
We're going back in. So that got changed. It was the Bonaparte Symphony, and then that got changed to the Symphonia Eroica, which is the heroic symphony. And then something I also think would be helpful for us to talk about really briefly is form. Because we've talked about it, we've mentioned form, we've talked about form, but I don't think that we've necessarily talked about the examples that are kind of important for us to know about form. So
Yeah.
there's a number of different styles that are coming out of the classical period. The big one that's becoming really, really popular, and every composer will be doing it, is symphony. Everyone's writing a
Mm-hmm.
symphony, but something that a lot of people don't know, and even I didn't really know the details of until like music history and stuff, is that symphony is structured. Like it's not just like, oh, a composer like decides they want to write for a bunch of instruments and they can do whatever they want. Symphony is a very specific form. It has 4 movements. There's always 4 movements, no more, no less, to a symphony.
Really? I didn't know that.
And so
Hmm.
if you're ever looking at if it's a true symphony and it's following the symphony form, there's 4 movements. The first movement starts with sonata form. So even within the movements, there's like very specific forms. So it starts with sonata form, which if we need an episode on just form, we'll do it. You can look it up, sonata form. It's cool.
It's like
Then
Moonlight Sonata. I feel like everyone knows that
mhm,
song. If you don't know what a sonata is, look up
yeah,
Moonlight Sonata and you've probably
Moonlight,
heard it.
Moonlight Sonata. Yeah, it's a very specific form where it like goes from specific melodies to there's a form. There's a form, kind of like how songs have verses and chorus is bridge and then chorus. Sonata is a very specific form in that way as well. Then the second movement is always going to be some sort of like slower movement. And in terms of what that one is, it'll probably be a theme and variation, which is, sorry, I'm just pulling up my reference so that I can see all of them here. So then the second is slow. It'll be song form or a theme and variation. And then the third movement gets faster. And there's a little bit more choices for the composers here. But it's always going to be like the faster form. Beethoven typically does it as like a scherzo. So it's going to be very, very fast, light, and quick. And then the last movement is going to be the big, in the 18th century, it was a little bit more light and they call it vivacious. And then in the 19th century, this is one of the things that Beethoven makes a change here. He does it a little bit more like epic and heroic as the fourth movement. But those are typically how the four movements in a true symphony form are broken down.
Nice. I am learning that for the first time.
Yeah. So it's something that I think lots of times when you hear symphony, it's used to describe the orchestra.
Right.
And then, so there's like, when you're talking about, a symphony orchestra, you're talking about the orchestra, but then there's also the form, like the symphony form, like the actual piece
of
that,
music.
like the pieces of music, and that's
Yeah.
a symphony, and it's not like, it's not the same. But anyway, so then we go into Beethoven's, we're kind of jumping all over the place. We go into Beethoven's second period, which we call his heroic
we've
period.
only done the first period.
We've only done the first period, but we'll be faster.
There's a lot to talk about with Beethoven. So
there really is. So the second period is his heroic period. This is where he does more symphonies. He does a lot of work. And we've talked a lot about, things that have happened in there. This is where he, tries to find love, always disappointed. He's kind of living in squalor. This is, this is where we have a lot more about his life. We know he's not doing great.
Do you think he wanted to find love? Or do you think it was like
so. Yeah. So he was frequently in love, but he was always disappointed. So like there's lots of letters and things that we have of him like courting various different people, but never really finding success.
That makes me sad, but also we probably got a lot of music on account of his tortured existence, which
exactly. Yeah.
is sad. But good for us.
So he's writing a lot of like symphonies. These are big symphonies. He's doing well. People are really liking his music. His music is selling well. But he's still living in squalor. And there's not really, no one really knows where the money is going, what he's doing with it, because, yeah. And then
interesting. Maybe gambling or something.
Something, probably drinking, but whatever. He, 1814, everything kind of goes downhill. His health, like we talked about, he's never a healthy man. His body is always kind of breaking down in some way. And in 1814, it seems to go like even further deteriorate. He's losing more and more hearing. He's like nearly deaf at this point. And then he decides.
So how old is he at this point? Not that old, like 40 something?
In 1814?
44.
Yeah. But also he only has, in 1814, he dies in 1827. So he doesn't have a crazy amount of time left at this point.
He's 57 when he dies. Dang.
Yeah.
It's pretty young.
Yeah. So considering all of his health problems, it feels like he lived a pretty long time considering that.
Yeah, that's true. I guess also in that era too, people would
Mhm.
die earlier.
Yeah. But anyway, then in 1815, he decides. So he has his brother Carl dies, and his brother Carl has a son named Carl. Which why?
Love it.
I guess
Carl
they
and
did that a
Carl.
lot.
Carl
I just
Jr.,
said,
maybe where
yeah,
we
I
get the
guess so.
popular fast food chain.
Yes, I think it's spelled different.
Undoubtedly.
But
No, it's the same.
so he takes on Carl as his legal guardian. He like goes to court to
His
get
legal garden.
his legal guardian. He goes to court to become the legal guardian. He even like Carl's mother isn't dead, but
Oh.
but Beethoven goes to court to like essentially fight his mom to get custody of Carl.
Do you think
And
maybe the mom couldn't? Like, because she's just a woman without a man?
I don't know. It sounds like he did it and the mother wasn't super happy about it.
Oh,
But
okay.
at the time, I don't know. I guess there wasn't much that she really could do to stop it. They
Yeah,
made the decision, and Beethoven was also he was pretty famous at this time too. So it might have been
right.
it was always going to be in his favor because it's like, oh, he's this famous Beethoven guy. We can't say no to that.
Right.
So, but it also sounds like Beethoven was not a good guardian. He would forget to leave money for Carl at times. He would just like go for whatever reasons, whether it was like work or whatever, and he would just like forget to leave money for Carl to like eat. He was
How
kind
old is
of
Carl?
I don't really have all the information on Carl there, but um yeah, it doesn't sound like Beethoven was a super great guardian. He was kind of forgetful. He didn't pay much attention to Carl, and then he would, but then so Carl didn't really think of Beethoven well either. It sounds like he was just kind of like annoyed
Don't
with him
blame
all the
him.
time. Um, so yeah, they were always at odds, it felt like. In fact, it seemed in 1826, Carl tried to commit suicide but failed. Yeah, it sounds they didn't have a great relationship, but
Did he fight to have to take care of this kid?
that's
Like
like the
maybe he
real
had some
question.
beef with the dad. I don't know. His
Well,
brother or
it
something.
was his brother. Well, I think it was like in my head, I'm imagining Beethoven was like, I have to take care of this kid now that my brother can't. Like
Right.
he felt like it was the quote unquote noble thing to do, maybe. But
Maybe.
it's definitely, you're looking at it and you're like, that was stupid because you should not be. And also, like at this point, he's 50, what? He's like in his 40s and he hasn't
Yeah.
found love. And in this point, if he ever wanted to be a dad, this is the closest chance he gets, you know?
Sounds
So
like it's not for him.
sounds like he shouldn't have ever wanted that.
Also, Carl feels like such a sad name. Like in my mind, it's like the cartoon kid with glasses and a hat and is like
Exactly.
always left on the playground. Like I
It's
don't
like,
know.
sorry, Carl.
Sorry, Carl. Carl never speaks.
Carl never says anything. But anyway, that's Beethoven and Carl. And throughout this whole time, Beethoven is also just getting worse and worse physically,
Right.
which kind of brings us into the final period where it's kind of like the third and final period of his life. He's pretty much lost all of his hearing. We don't really see him doing well at all. Um, but he still manages um, to create a couple pretty crazy things. So the symphony with Ode to Joy, which is
Yeah.
a Beethoven composition that happens in his third like creative period when he's pretty much deaf. He can't hear anything at this point. He has like
Wow.
ear trumpets that he's using just to try and hear things. There's lots of stories of him like holding a pencil in his teeth and then using it to feel the strings on the piano to try and hear the
Get the
notes and things,
vibrations.
the
Oh,
vibrations and stuff. And so there's like all of these stories about like just his desperate attempts to be able to hear what he's writing. And this is where um he does this. And so even in something interesting about Ode to Joy, this is kind of part of that testament that he said that he'll get sad. I think the testament, like in the letter, he talks about like this joy, like this kind of sorrowful joy that he has for music. And so it's really beautiful that in this kind of like final period of his creative time, he ends the symphony with the last movement is Ode to Joy. And there's a choral setting. So Ode to Joy was a pre-existing like poem, I think it was, that he
is
sets
that the
to music.
joyful me? That's
Mhm.
that, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And so that melody is what he creates. He sets the music. He sets the words to music. And so that's something that's interesting in that symphony, is because adding a choir to a symphony, that was a new thing. No one had really done that. And that was
Yeah.
the finale of his ninth symphony. And then he dies because he hitched a ride in an open milk wagon in damp weather. So he was just sitting
That'll
in the
do
back
it.
of a milk wagon. And that was kind
Let
of
this be a lesson to you all.
the beginning of the end. Yeah. So there's talking
So
a
he
little
got
bit
sick
about,
from that, or what?
yeah. So he got sick from that and he just wasn't able to make it after that. But something interesting. Let's talk briefly. We're already over as much time as I want.
Yeah, wow. There's so
There's a
much
lot
to
to
talk about.
There's a lot to talk about.
He's a
But
really interesting guy.
He really is. But if we talk just briefly, let's talk about like some of his music, and maybe why it's a little different. We've already talked about it, but one we haven't talked about is Symphony Number 5, which is easily maybe the most famous symphony ever written.
Bum,
And
bum,
that
bum,
is
bum. Bum, bum, bum,
exactly.
bum.
Yeah, so for most people, just the average listener, that is the classical symphony. Yeah, it's listening to it again. It's so famous. It's easy to be like, I've heard this 1,000 times. What's so different about it? But then you're listening to it kind of like in progression to all of the music that's come before. And you're like, wait, this is actually so interesting. Because one of the big things that's interesting about that is that the subject, like the melodic subject, is super short compared to everything that's come before, right? Like all of the music before, it's like there's kind of this long melody that happens before it's repeated. The subject of the Fifth Symphony, the first movement, is the da 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 da. That's it.
3
Da, da,
notes.
da,
That's
da.
crazy.
Yeah. So it's short, 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 long. That's the whole subject of that piece. And he's like, the amount of stuff that he's able to do with that, super, super simple, is really, really amazing. And
Yeah.
that's something that's just so original when you're listening to it. Something that I thought was interesting while reading is Beethoven. We know he was kind of like this troubled man in life, but it's really interesting to think about how that played into his writing as a composer. And something that I was reading was the difference between looking at some of the manuscripts that Beethoven had versus some of his predecessors. Like we talked about Mozart, things came super easily for Mozart. He could write the entire thing in his head, and then all he had to do was write it down. Whereas Beethoven, and I have a book with an example of like a manuscript there. And so for those that can't see, this example of the manuscript, it's like covered in ink blotches. So many things are scratched out, rewritten, scratched out. And I think that just goes to show how he was as a composer. You know, he has this troubled life. And then even in composing, he's like tortured over the music that he's writing. And I think it's so interesting just to
It's
see
like
the
his
different
inner
styles
life.
that it's. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can I see it again? Can you hold it up? And we can drop this in on our Instagram for anyone who would like to see what it looks like. It's like completely illegible. Like it looks like my music theory homework from freshman year of college.
Yeah, exactly.
Like trying to learn how to draw notes. Like
Yeah, and I think that for me, it's something that's just it's really nice to see because I think so
Mhm.
often people think of like composers have to be like this Mozart that you can write the whole thing in your head, you can see it, and then all you do is you just write it down. And it's kind of refreshing when you're looking at someone who is such a giant when it comes to music and music history. And then you're looking at the music and you're like, wait, he he wrote like I did my homework, you know? Like he
Yeah.
had to erase, he had to rewrite, he had to cross things out. He wasn't, it wasn't that it came easily to him. Like he struggled with the music until he found what worked. And I think that's
Yeah.
something that is kind of nice and refreshing when you're like looking at someone who feels like such a behemoth in music that you're like,
Right.
wait, he was also human.
Yes, and I think there's also the stigma of like, this phrase like the song wrote itself, that it's like all the really best works, all the really good musical works and songs
Hmm.
just happened to the artist, which does
Yeah.
happen, but also it makes me remember that that's not all the best works that came that way. Because sometimes I sit at the piano and I'm like struggling with one freaking chorus for 2 hours. And I'm like, this shouldn't be this hard. I probably should just scrap it if I'm spending this much time on it. It's like, that's not necessarily true. You got
Yeah.
to try stuff.
Yeah. And it's like maybe you just have to write it down and eventually you'll be able to rewrite it, but it doesn't have to live like you don't have to have a complete song in your head before you start. Just start, you know?
Yeah, totally.
So that was something that like I thought seeing his manuscript was really, really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then just a little bit, I'm not even going to go into these, but I'm just going to name them if anyone wants to go back and listen to anything. These are kind of like his, you know, best hits, Beethoven's best hits. So
Mm-hmm.
he wrote he wrote concertos as well. He has some pretty famous concertos. He has 5 for piano, 1 for violin. Um, so the big ones, I would say maybe his best one for concertos. If you get a listen, you can check it out. It's Concerto Number 4 in G major. It was written in 1809. He also wrote 16 string quartets. So he has a lot of string quartets. Again,
Wow.
bunch of beautiful ones. It is interesting. He only wrote one opera. I think it did fine enough, but it wasn't really something that he invested a lot of time in, which I also think is interesting.
It's kind of fierce though, just to write an opera, just to try it.
Yeah. And then, yes.
It's a lot
So,
of
and
work.
then he had a bunch of symphonies. His biggest contribution, I think, is his work with symphony music. So, we've talked about a few of them. The Ninth Symphony, I think, was his last. I think he started another one after that, but I don't think he finished it. And then we talked a little bit about the Ninth Symphony, which ends with Ode to Joy. So those, if you're looking for some symphonies to listen to, uh, those would be, some of the greatest hits. Everything in between, also lots of great stuff.
Beethoven is freaking awesome. I mean, his music is freaking awesome. And it's encouraging. I feel like the lesson to me is that, like, it's okay if things aren't always going the best on the outside. What you have on the inside can still be profoundly impactful. Like,
Hmm.
genuinely, like
Yeah,
people didn't like him. He was a shambles. He was sick all the time. But he had a vision and he had a song in his heart, if you will.
exactly.
And
Yeah,
and
I think
he's like so impactful. It's crazy.
he really set the standard. Well, yeah, in a lot of ways, he kind of turned the tables for what classical music could be. Um, and yeah, I think, like you said, he the most beautiful thing I think that he was able to contribute was this kind of philosophy. Like he gave us a philosophy for music that I don't think a lot of composers up until this point had given us to the same degree. This whole idea
Yeah.
that, he knew everything was painful, everything hurt, from his body to his, lack of being able to find someone that could love him, you know,
I
and
feel so sad about that.
but he still was like, as much as I hate my life, I can't end it because I know I have this music that I have to let the world see. Like I have to
He
get
has a
it out.
calling over his life. Like he
Yeah.
had a gift, like a true vocation.
Hmm.
He's like, I don't even want this. Like I would end it all, but I have this, so
Have to. Yeah, I
I
have to
have to
continue
give
for
it.
that.
Yeah.
And that for me, that is truly what I love about him when reading. Is it's like, okay, I wouldn't want to be his friend. He would not be a friend of mine. Like he doesn't seem
Maybe
like
he
a
would though,
super,
because
I don't know.
you're
He doesn't
so
see,
easygoing. You can be friends with anyone.
oh, but I don't know. He would not be someone that I'd be like, oh, let's hang out all the time. I think he would just,
Sure.
you know, I have a feeling
Yeah.
he probably was a perpetual complainer, but
Probably. Like kind
but
of a bummer in general.
kind of a bummer in general, but also like rightly so. You're like,
Yeah.
actually, you are like your life actually does suck.
Like you wouldn't have a lot of encouragement for him as his friend. It'd
Yeah,
be like, well, yes. He'd be
yeah.
like,
It's
I
like
can't do anything and no one loves me. And you're like,
you're right. Yeah.
well, not that he can't do anything, because he can, but not physically.
Yeah. That would be the bummer. But I think, yeah, that, and I think you touched on it a little bit too, but it doesn't have to be perfect the first time. I think that's something that he teaches us as well,
Mm-hmm.
is that, you know, when you're looking at the music that he did, it doesn't have to be perfect the first time. He also has this
You can
incredible
wrestle with
repertoire,
it.
wrestle with it. He has incredible repertoire of some of the most famous things ever, but also, you know, a lot of historians will kind of say that it comes and goes. Like there's moments of this crazy inspired work, but then there's also a lot that isn't necessarily as strong. And I think that's something that it also teaches us too. It's that it doesn't always have to be a banger.
Yeah.
But
And with that, we leave you to think,
to
listeners,
think it doesn't
to
always have to be a
consider.
banger. Consider
Mic
this.
drop.
It doesn't always have to be a banger.
Yeah. And there you have it, from Beethoven's mouth himself. That was an exact quote.
His exact quote. Well, yeah, I think that concludes this one. And I'm excited for the next one, and we'll be back with everyone next week with hopefully a shorter episode. We're like coming
Or
in
not,
on an hour
hopefully.
for this one.
Well, I hope
Mm.
this, if you're listening to this on the subway, it probably got you all the way to Brooklyn. So you're welcome.
That's true. From the Bronx to Brooklyn.
Yeah.
One episode.
This is mostly true. Thanks for joining us today.
Catch y'all next week.